Right, I'm Will. I graduated from my diploma in 2009. I've got a background in sort of posh gardens, I guess. I did that for a couple of years during my degree, working on projects in London, across the UK, as far afield as Barbados. Also gaining experience working at on Chelsea Flower Show Garden. I'm not going to talk about any of that because that's pretty boring. I'm going to talk about things that I've sort of done during and since my diploma. At the end of my diploma, I worked on the Ravens 8 Island down upstream from here, and that sort of really spurred me on to work more socially and with communities, looking at work that sort of didn't need to use as much money, as much expense, and sort of focus on the theory of social landscapes, really. So looking at the question that Ed set, I kind of took it a little bit more literally. The landscape is simply a depiction of natural scenery, unlike a portrait, which is a representation of a person, trying to successfully engage the subject with the viewer. But like a landscape, everyone interprets the picture differently. And bringing portraits and landscapes together, I think that makes landscape architecture. The people are integral to landscape. So people, these are sort of people that inspire me, people I've experienced, people I've met. Sort of, really, yeah, so I'll just go through them. Used to live in this part of town, really strong, diverse neighbourhood. Home of the infamous Portobello Road, the Carnival. Meanwhile Gardens, the oldest community garden in the country. The first concrete skate park in Europe. And the home of our current Prime Minister. And they're all sort of nestled in, sharing this strong and very diverse community. Critical mass happens on the last Friday of every month in 300 cities across the world. Really transforming the streets. It's been called a accidental or organised coincidence. People just take over the streets. There's no hierarchy. Whoever's at the front takes the lead, and they just sort of take control of the streets for a few hours before handing it back to normality. So it really animates. I don't know if you've done it, if you cycle, go along. It's a real party atmosphere. Everyone's there just for the fun of it. Bristol Art, it's my hometown. Sort of the top left, this sort of piece of art that was up there for 20 years of my life. It's called the Camel Blaster. I think using colloquial language really anchors it within the local environment. But then again, Banksy, also from Bristol, takes international issues across the world. It allows people to express themselves, it's constantly changing, and brings vibrancy to the street. When we take Britain, this is a sort of collaboration between two art groups. The Mutoid Waste Company, formed out of the Thatcherite era. They used to just reclaim abandoned buildings, use sort of bits of cars. They've got a MiG jet that they drive around. They used to drive around London in a skull bus and a car that looked like a fish. Collaborating with the Cordy House graffiti family in East London, a big sort of historical arts background. And they just take on spaces like this one in the under the Westway in West London. They try and get away from the sort of clinical, antiseptic environment, the class sort of system of these galleries you may see in sort of central London, where people go in and scratch their little chins and sort of, that looks good, and what does that mean? And they just try and create a party atmosphere where everyone can come along and just enjoy it. A comment from Joe Rush from the Mutoid Waste Company said that the best way to explore art and understand it is when you're completely off your head. So if you've ever been, they do stuff at Glastonbury and a lot of festivals across the world. Just check them out. Pie and mash. I'm sure you're going, why is he showing me a picture of pie and mash? Well, it's more than that, I reckon. This is Joe Cook, a fourth generation purveyor of traditional East London fare. But he provides a little bit more than that, I think. He knows your name. He asks how you're doing. He knows a lot of what's going on in the community. And this might be the only interaction some people get in their day. There's probably places like this in your hometowns, across London, your local pub, your local shop. and it's just sort of the real hub of the community. So now I'm going to ask you lot a few questions. You can write them down, you can shout them out, whatever you like. But the next 3 images, I just want you to have a think about the similarities between them. I've picked out one, you might be able to pick out some more. First question. So there's a lovely landscape, followed by another one, I'm sure you all know this one. And another one in the City of London. So what's the answer? Well, I think it's privatisation. What's privatisation? Well, all of the above are maintained and controlled by Broadgate estates. Don't get me wrong, they've created a really nice aesthetic, but how do they integrate with their local surroundings, their local environment? They've got increased CCTV, they've got their own private security companies, and you can be asked to leave without any question. I think that's slightly wrong, it's not public to me. And as Anne Minton says from her book, increasing this control sort of removes that personal and collective responsibility and therefore undermines the trust between one another. And on top of that, I think personally it sort of becomes these sort of sterile, homogenised and controlled environments. Another little question. Same scenario, 3 images. You probably know these ones a bit better. The Oyster card, I'm sure you've all got one in your pocket. Self-checkout, I'm sure you've done this. And finally, online banking. Now what's the similarity between these? Automation.
Shut up, go on, shut up.
It's automation. Again, very efficient, part of our everyday lives, but they break down our interaction with human beings. All 3 of these, they sort of, the ticket attendant, the desk clerk, the shopkeeper, all their positions become obsolete. And this compiled with email, Facebook, iPhones, sat-nav. I mean, look at sat-nav, you sort of driving around, you'd stop and you'd ask someone and they might tell you there's a nice little pub down the road, or might even just might brighten their day, but you're not, you're listening to some horrible generic voice shouting at you, which that pisses me off. But and you need this stimulus, it sort of activates our brains, it keeps that creativity bubbling over. And so soon we'll probably be able to do a whole day automated without any interaction with any human being. And I think that's just taking the character away from our landscapes, our urban environments, our rural environments. Third question, same scenario. Westfield, the largest inner city shopping centre in Europe. St David's, Cardiff, and Cabot Circus in Bristol. Come on then. This one is homogenisation. The idea that everywhere is anywhere. Or as the New Economics Foundation coined the phrase, the clone town, where our streets are significantly dominated by chain stores. This is devastating independent shops, businesses, and really just reducing the local community, the diversity and the identity of our sort of towns, cities, villages. Nice little quote from Paul Kingsnorth from the Real England. Just that they're all being eroded. And if it's not profitable or obedient, then it's not safe from homogenisation and control. I'm just going to show you a little video just to illustrate a sort of humorous idea of if our country was controlled by one retailer.
Changes in the way we shopped. All electronic equipment was given away free with newspapers, while everything else was bought at Tesco's.
Now, I was mentioning Tesco earlier on because Tesco are always in the news these days.
By 2012, Tesco's had a superstore in every square mile in Britain.
Tesco were brokering world heavyweight bouts, representing entertainment stars. They were making most of the films that were being made. Tesco's slogan changed from every little helps to we control every aspect of your lives.
Soon, Tesco's got planning permission to build anywhere in the country, even on the side of a cliff. By then, Britain was fully saturated with Tesco's, and the supermarket chain concluded it would have to look elsewhere for domination.
And then there was the war with Denmark. It started, of course, because Tesco needed room to expand. For a long time, they'd yearned to create a superstate, which was, well, the first retail country.
At noon on January the 21st, 2013, Tesco's invaded Denmark with 200 superstores and 1,500 Tesco Expresses.
The Tesco thing was a shock.
Sorry about that. It's a bit extreme, I know, but it just gets that point across. How do I bring it up to full screen? Okay, sorry.
We can cut that out.
Okay. Press Control L. Okay, cool. Right. Now I'm going to introduce sort of a little social design platform I've sort of set up, working, just sort of playing with ideas, sort of a consequence of all my sort of inspiration and studies, looking at sort of social history, attitudes and the way things are going. Just sort of taking it upon myself to experiment with installations, see if we can provoke some reactions, and see if we can break our day-to-day routine. All of the projects coming up are self-initiated and self-funded, and if anything, we're just trying to raise a little smile. Sort of an ethos I sort of work with is, sorry, forgot about this page. Yeah, so the idea is provoking thoughts in order to generate reactions, trying to change our perception of our surroundings. If anything, make you smile. So yeah, a little sort of analogy of this is the garden fence. Used to be elbow high, used to be able to sort of lean on it, chat to your neighbour, keep an eye on one another, share things. Things are changing. They're getting too high. I mean, this is an installation called The Point of View. That's the blue ribbon that surrounds the Olympic site. And it just sort of shows the enclosure, the sort of idea of security, and it's just sort of becoming quite ridiculous. So I'd like to bring it back to the two old chaps leaning on the fence. So the first project that I did was in April last year, if that's Easter, called How Many Stops? Looking at the London bus network, observing how people used it. Rather than looking at the physical attributes to sort of getting off and walking, I was looking at the social ones. So just seeing, see if you can change your routine using humorous, sort of provoking little jokey slogans placed strategically on London transport bus stops. The idea that instead of sort of having this mundane, very rigid routine every day you go to work or college or just going to the shops, you might just have a walk, you might grab a coffee on the way, smoke a fag, whatever. But you might meet someone, you might have that chance encounter. So now I'm going to show you the installations. Hopefully they don't offend, they're purely there as a humorous sort of provocation. We did this over 9 hours in one night. There were 3 of us in high-vis jackets. No one took any notice of us, so it means just shows you can get away with anything wearing a high-vis jacket. And we had some good responses. This was probably the most commented upon, both good and bad. And this one, right outside Selfridges, bought your socks off, you can always go buy some more. And I guess it's in line with the obesity campaigns that the government have set up. We followed, we've got a load of the design standards from TfL, followed them to the millimetre, and have been in talks with London Museum of Transport, who are really keen on their social history. So this is sort of a mock-up of how they might like to use it, with a woman outside John Lewis on Oxford Street. Just raising a little smile and chatting to a couple of people about it. Even that was just great to see, being able to wander down the street knowing that I'd done this installation and just seeing people look at it, raise a little smirk or get a bit pissed off. But either way, it's a reaction. I'm going to show you a little clip of another artist who does similar things, just takes it upon himself to get out there and mess around, really.
Putting up a picture of Brown or Cameron and saying, you know, hang 'em. It's just too simple. You got to kind of, like say, it made you laugh a little bit. You know, it made you think, and yeah, maybe that's how it works.
When I've got the idea for something, it's how do you present it? You know, like the one I've just done. You're presenting a politician as a criminal, you've got to put it across like that. Or if you think, you know, London's turning into a prison, then you make the sign for it. kind of put it in the area between real and unreal, so you can just about notice if you're a little bit switched on. You can just about notice that there's something not quite right with the sign or the picture.
It's the only way you can sort of vent your spleen, really. You know, you can moan about it, but you know, if you want to actually, I don't know, really get it off your chest, then that's what I do.
And I think we all are switched on as landscape architects. We can make these changes, we can get out there and put these sort of direct action. I watched this and it just inspired me to take a few of my crazy sketches and ideas out of my sketchbooks and just put them into action. So you can do the same. Get it out there, get it seen. Apple L, Control L.
Yeah.
So, yeah, now going to the second project in the series, the parking ticket. I don't know if you drive, probably all don't, because we're quite green and we're landscape architects, but I don't know if you've ever had a parking ticket, but that negative emotion is undescribable. It's the reaction, possible altercation you get, then you've got the fine, and how that impacts on your day is just a pain in the arse, really. So, yeah, we just wanted to see if we could reverse that reaction and sort of challenge the way people think. It was issued in exactly the same way, same yellow wallet, but that's exactly where the similarity ends. We're trying to encourage people to challenge the automated environment. All too often we accept things from the powers that be without question. So we're just really getting to people to try and challenge their day-to-day routine, their day-to-day living. So here's a copy of the ticket. Hopefully you can all read it. Basically, they're all the same. We did 100 in Westminster, where the parking ticket actually was created back in the 20s. It basically just says, you've parked brilliantly within your allotted time. You should now carry on your day with the knowledge that you have no fine to pay and that you should now smile. All I asked was that instead of payment, I got some feedback on the reaction, how this may have impacted on your day, the influence of how a real one would have impacted on your day. And yeah, it really struck a chord. A lady rang into Radio London the day I did it, or the day after I did it, and said, I've just had this ticket, has anyone else had one? She was sure, like on returning to her vehicle, that she hadn't violated any parking restrictions, but the ticket still inspired that fear that we've all succumbed to from Big Brother. It just sort of is subconsciously induced on us, and on opening it, she just completely changed her reaction, yeah, it made her smile and made her think. It caught the attention of The Guardian and 5 other radio stations nationally. I'm now in talks with a television production company about doing a show, possibly. So that's what the ticket looked like on the street. Did 100 of these of an afternoon, and then I continued to do them every time I was in town. So yeah, I mean, they look exactly the same. And one happy thing that came out of it was the idea that the traffic wardens walked past it, and yet they did nothing. So maybe we were saving people a bit of money and a fine themselves. But if anything, the 3 green dots is purely there to congratulate you for doing something right. We're so often condemned for doing things wrong. We're just trying to boost the spirits of everyday people on the street, the public. Okay, now I'm completely changing the subject, but still on the same lines. Looking at Detroit, I've been studying this quite a lot because I plan to go out there and get involved with the reinvention of downtown Detroit. I'm going to show you a little video of sort of the history. Don't know if you know, it's the Motor City. Grew out of the car, the Ford, Cadillac. But the Motor City then left, consumerism grew, the downtowns became racial tension, lots of crime, and then with Japanese and foreign sort of production, the automobile industry sort of collapsed. I'm hoping I've got the right clip. Yeah.
I don't think there has ever been a place where the possibilities of humanity were more actualized than they were in Michigan from 1945 to 72. It was beyond an American dream, it was an actuality. Everybody immigrated to America, got jobs. You were suddenly earning a middle-class wage. You'd buy a house in the suburbs. You could buy a second house up in the lake country and buy a boat, buy 2 cars, and die smiling.
Frequently called the most cosmopolitan city of the Midwest, Detroit today stands at the threshold of a bright new future.
Success, winning, conquering the world gave everybody in Detroit the one thing they wanted, which was the ability to leave Detroit. All the tax base left, the businesses left. There was a lot of class and race chaos. Everybody was caught in a swirl and nobody knew how to pull it together. It became an epic poem of failure.
So, yeah, I'm sure you're thinking, God, that looks like a bit of a hellhole. But that inspires people to get out and do stuff. That really does. And unlike the UK, where we are suffocated by bureaucracy, Detroit still has this sort of sense of lawlessness where you can just get on and do things. So I'm just going to illustrate 5 quick projects going on in Detroit at the moment that people have just taken their initiative and just trying to take back the streets and get it done, get things changing, get things moving. One way to Detroit Lives uses mixed media to present a variety of topics, predominantly surrounding the social and economic opportunity in Detroit. Basically just sort of like this, they've just taken a grey wall, got the community involved, and really just sort of transformed it into this cheeky little mural just to really inspire people in the local area, and they encourage people to live, work and play within the city. I'm actually in talks with these guys about doing the fine parking company over there, as we both thought it would be quite apt to do that within the Motor City. The second project, the Heidelberg project, sort of started by Tyree Guyton and his grandfather, just sick of the way their neighbourhood was becoming full of racial tension, drugs, crime, vandalism. So they just started painting dots on the front of their house. This is internationally known as the polka dot house. This then sort of spread across the streets, the adjacent streets, and it's become this sort of huge art environment. As they say, taking vacant lots and turning them into lots of art. It's now attracting 275,000 people a year. Tyree Guyton goes all over the world talking about how art can improve the community, as far afield as Sydney, and just trying to improve lives and neighbourhoods through art. Third project, the community and public art in Detroit, transforming bland public spaces into visually exciting ones, and trying to encourage civil dialogue, really. Basically reinforcing the cultural identity and deepening cultural understanding. There's a city-wide network of arts, youth, education and community development organisations in association with the College of Creative Studies. Basically just trying to enhance them. This building was derelict, is now a bustling art studio sort of environment. Phil Cooley, he's actually an ex-Louis Vuitton supermodel, travelled internationally, studied design in New York, and living in lots of big cities around the world. He just became fed up that he couldn't do anything. He was unheard. Like in London, you've got a point, you've got to have money, you've got to have experience to do it. He moved back to his hometown of Detroit, started by setting up a restaurant, and then this sort of spiraled into a series of revitalisation projects, including on the left the Roosevelt Park. This is completely off his own back, group of his friends, family, transforming the sort of parkland, sort of the streets in front of the Detroit Central Station. He's a champion of grassroots and one of the city's most visible urban activists. He's used as a consultant by the local government, by other organisations to come in and talk to about how he can get things done. I'll show you a little video of sort of what he's up to after this so you get a better insight. And then I guess the most sort of talked about front cover of the Landscape Institute magazine recently, the greening of Detroit. As it says there's 40 square miles of abandoned land. Detroit is the size of San Francisco, Manhattan and Boston combined. So I don't know if you know those places, but it's pretty big. started small. There's now 877 community gardens, urban gardens, all manned individually by families, cooperatives, and all the food at all the markets is grown in Detroit. This is basically trying to counteract the food desert that's become downtown Detroit. If you don't know what a food desert is, it's an area in the industrial world where affordable food is difficult to obtain. So by growing it within the downtown area of Detroit, makes it a lot more accessible and therefore cheaper because it hasn't got to travel so far. This is attracting attention from large commercial agricultural companies, and it's actually going to become the largest urban farm in the world. This is therefore bringing in investment, jobs, and sort of really enlivening the sort of inner city Detroit. Finally, just going to finish with another video about Detroit, just about what the people are up to, if I can.
I think the younger generation is able to look at a lot of things that might not be aesthetically pleasing or might seem a little bit too rough on the surface and see potential and how to transform them into something very usable.
Hi, Chip. You know everyone in Detroit.
Yeah, everybody knows everyone in Detroit. There's only 8 of us left. So the pedestrian bridge here is a really cool project.
Does it go over the freeway?
Yeah, over the freeway. So, I mean, that's the main thing is, like, the freeways kind of divided up our city and went through a lot of our really strong, especially black neighborhoods. What ends up happening is, you know, you have all these segregated communities.
So you're rejoining your communities?
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. Hanging right here.
We have a terrific architectural history in the city of Detroit, and a building such as Michigan Central, which is, you know, the same architect as Grand Central Station in New York City, it's one of our assets. People continually come in and photograph and visit, and it needs to be preserved.
You can swing by into the old Michigan Central Station, see some of the crew. They're out there with my mom today, pulling weeds, just helping beautify the park. So we want to create like more of a plaza atmosphere. So we took the geometries and transferred them down to the ground plane, so it's like a shadow of the train station, so it would act as like a memorial if anything ever did happen to it. We're going to cut the roads that dissect it, put an amphitheater out there. We're also going to do a skate park under these trees here. I'm hoping to just open the doors, really, you know, and just let it be a performance space. That all of our efforts in the park are just to encourage something to happen here. Potentially, it could be rehabbed. That would be terrific. At the same time, it's beautiful now, and it's so unique. You'd never see a building like this in any other city because no one has let a building like this fall to such disrepair.
Okay, well, that was my take on what is landscape. Just to sort of readdress what conclude. I guess people to me are really important in the social aspects. Making people think outside the box and generally just enjoying it and making people smile is key. So thank you very much. Take that.